In this short video, we'll talk briefly about how to create clicker questions for flipped classrooms to support peer instruction. And specifically, what makes a good clicker question. So as you're thinking about making a clicker question, there are a couple of different starting points you might have. First, you might start with existing lecture materials or lecture experiences that you have, and that's actually the process I'll show you today. But another way you might come up with a clicker question is reviewing the textbook that you're assigning students to read. Perhaps as you go through it, you might identify a part of the book that you just know students won't get just by reading it. However, one of the ways I often have worked is I have existing things, lecture slides or things that I do in lecture, and I will want to change some of those into clicker questions. So in teaching an introductory programming course, one of the things that we have to teach students is how these things called for loops work, okay? So there's just basically these for loop things. They, based on these numbers here, 0 and less than 10, they cause this statement, print line foo, to happen some number of times. Now, when I've been taught this before, maybe one way I would have taught it would be I'd be working and writing the example down on the board. And you know, I always try to keep my students really engaged in my class. So I might write down this code and then I'd turn around and I'd ask the students, well, how many times does this run? And I now call this my former behavior cheerleading questioning. Because, you're writing on the board, you're trying to keep them engaged, and you turn around and you go, and open up, how many times? And you want them to go, 10! But really only about 5 people ever do that. Another way I might have chosen to convey this to students would be to actually have multiple variations of this for loop on the same slide, maybe I less than 10, I less than or equal to 10, and talk to the students about how many times each of them would run. Or perhaps sometimes I might even code it for them live and change the loop a few times and hope that they helped observe what was actually happening. The problem with all of those approaches is that really I was the one doing all the work. I mean, yeah, I might ask students to yell something out, but really I was the only one I could be sure was actually thinking about this problem. So a very simple first clicker question you might make based on this could be this. So we have the same code here, and down here we have 5 options, 0, 10, 9, and 11. Now the correct answer is 10. And 9 is something that you might get because it's close, it's off by 1, 11 is close. By the way, students who know better than I do apparently about clicker question design or multiple choice question design will always know that if you have something that's out of order here, that probably the second one is the important one. Turns out apparently that's how humans do that. So always try to put your options in ascending or descending order. Now, the problem with this particular question is that even if I ask students to think about this and vote on it and then discuss with each other, this problem just isn't very good at encouraging discussion. I mean, here's how it might go. For example, I pick B and you pick C. And so we each vote and we're supposed to turn and discuss it with each other, and you go, I don't know, I pick B. And you say, well, I don't know, I pick C. And it's like Facebook, right? It's not like you'd just naturally be like, well, it's 10. No, it's 9. There's not a whole lot of easy discussion there. So a better version of get a question to get this concept across and get students analyzing it the way I want them to is the following. So what's different here is I'm asking which of the following loop headers will cause the loop to run 10 times. And I'm giving students different options here. And what's really important is that these options naturally encourage them in talking about something. So if you said A and I said B, you'd be like, well, I said A because it's less than 10, not less than or equal to 10, and that's important because blah, blah, blah. Or same way with C and D, you'd say, oh, well, it started with 1. Okay, so the options up there just are a little bit better at leading students into what to have a discussion about. However, something that's even better about this is actually there are 2 answers that are correct. A is correct and D is correct. And this is a really important thing that I want to bring up with students about for loops, that really you can write many different for loop headers that run 10 times, but it so happens that in the textbook, they always have their loop starting at 0. So I need to bring it forward to students that, hey, that is important. There are several other things that I will bring to their attention all through the same problem. First off, and this will just sound weird to most of you, but the fact that we're using this variable named j. It turns out every computer science textbook known to man always uses I, and students think I is a miracle thing, and it's not. You can use any name that you want. The other thing is that how important it is to them to pay attention to detail. Is it less than or equal to? What does that mean? How is that going to change things? And then finally, there's actually a technique that I really recommend, especially when they're doing things on a test, to figure this out, which is in fact counting on their fingers. I say, hey, look, it's okay. You can count. Start 0, 1, 2. And so those are 3 specific things that I will try to bring out in the course of the discussion that are all important things that I need to coach students in paying attention to for loops. So how should you build a peer instruction question? The first thing to do, again, is to identify the big idea that you want to go into. Maybe that's a skill, maybe it's a concept, etc. And again, maybe this comes from slides or your previous experience, or maybe it comes from reading the book and they're going, if I send them to read that, they're not going to get it. So this is, again, a specific issue students often get wrong or struggle with. Then most importantly, in developing your question and in developing what it is you want them to do, you want to imagine what you want your students saying to each other in analyzing or explaining why the correct answer is right, and also in analyzing or explaining why the wrong answers are wrong. Okay? We'd like to have a really good discussion about each of the wrong answers and have a meaningful thing to say about why that's not it. To that extent, it's a good idea to keep your options limited and meaningfully focused so that students will go over each one. If that means you only have 3 options can be really great. So hopefully this will have helped you design a good clicker question.